Hello and welcome to the Car Care channel, and welcome to a very important question. Should you buy a 100 series Toyota Land Cruiser? The 100 series is one of the most important Land Cruiser models, because this is the model when they switched from full-on off-road vehicles with some leather stitched on them to actual comfortable cars that are meant to be driven on the road and equally off-road as well. And in my opinion, the 100 series, if you find the right one, they are really one of the most reliable Land Cruisers. However, no car is perfect, and something that works against them is age. They are getting older. The newest one is a 2007. So in today's video, I want to run you through some of their common problems, because what I'm seeing in the market today is these things are commanding a very high premium. And buy the right one, and you're going to enjoy it and really explore that legendary Land Cruiser reliability. But buy the wrong one, you'll have nothing but problems, and it'll be a very sour experience. And without further ado, let's dive into the first category as we talk about their common problems and things you should know if you're buying one or you own one. Let's start with the engines. There's actually two potential engines in the US market for the 100 series Land Cruiser. They're both 2UZ FE, which is just a legend. It's an engine that, as long as you take care of it, it'll just keep going. There is not much that goes internally wrong with these engines. They're underpowered, they're big V8s, they don't get great gas mileage, they're a little bit maintenance thirsty, but they will run and run as long as you take care of them. And that take care of them part we're going to talk about. So I said there's two engines. Even though they're both 2UZ FEs, there's two versions of that engine. First one is from 98 all the way to 2005, the non-VVTi variant. Although in 2003 they did get a little update, a few things, they got a little bit more power, but it's almost unnoticeable. But 2006 and 2007 got the VVTi version of the 2UZ FE, making a lot more power, and it's notably a more smoother running engine and kind of a better one in performance wise, not reliability. Reliability is pretty similar. With that, let's dive into this engine. This engine is very maintenance thirsty. I'm going to talk about it. The first thing is the timing belt. So this is a timing belt engine. It does need its replacement every 90,000 miles or 9 years, whichever comes first. Vital that you do that. This is an interference engine. You don't change the timing belt gets old, even though they're known to last more than the 90,000 miles. Don't push it, because if you break that belt, the valves will immediately get destroyed. And usually it's the one on the exhaust side, on the passenger side bank, that go first. That's the first common one that always goes. In addition to the timing belt, this has a water pump. Although they are not known to leak and just get really bad, always replace it with the timing belt. Equally, the seals, crank seal, cam seals, now on the non-VVTi engine, especially now that these are getting older, from 98 all the way to 2005, every time you do a timing belt, it's highly advisable that you replace the cam seals and the crank seal. But the 2006 and 7, that is a very major operation, because you have to remove the cams to replace the cam seal. Crank seal, though, you can replace it. Not a bad idea to do it as a preventative. Now, another thing with these engines, they love their noises. And let's start in the dive into the noise section. First one is belt tensioner and belt idler. They love to go and make all kinds of noises. And then there's another idler that drives the fan. That also loves to go, and these, especially when they get older, you get play, you get all kind of whining noises and strange bearing noises. Belt tensioner is one of the cheapest belt tensioners you can buy for a Toyota or Lexus. The idler is more expensive, even though it's just an idler, but the bracket that has the idler that drives the cooling fan, very expensive, new. You can get an ASIN one. That's what I usually recommend. It's exactly the same thing. Now, moving away from that to the noise section, and this is especially if you have a rust belt special. The exhaust manifolds, they develop cracks and they start leaking. The best way to know these is make sure if you're going to buy one, start it cold. It should not be ticking. This engine is whisper quiet. You can't even hear it run. If you start hearing that ticking and eventually it kind of gets less and goes away, exhaust manifolds, and they are very expensive on these. You will maybe have to replace them once in the life of the car, although there's a very long life. If you take care of one of these, they will really last a very long time. But that is one of the things, if you're going to buy one, watch out for. It's usually the rust belt special, which we're going to get into the rust a lot. Also, this is a leaky engine. Let's put it this way. Let's talk about some of the common leaks with it. Valve cover gaskets. It seems like every 5 to 7 years you will potentially do a valve cover gasket set. Very simple, super DIY friendly. I mean, folks, this is a very easy engine to work on. Until you get into some of the bottom stuff, we'll talk about it. But overall, these are very easy to work on. The thing I will tell you though with leaks, coolant leaks, that lead to head gasket failures, and we see this a lot, more than you think, unfortunately lately with 100 series Land Cruiser head gaskets, because of the neglect, because these are simply getting too old. Radiators. Folks, if you have a radiator that has an appearance that's like has micro cracks, is severely discolored, time to replace it with your next timing belt, because these radiators, they get so old and people just completely forget about them. They start leaking and they don't notice them, and it overheats. It doesn't take much. Same thing with the radiator hoses. Folks, these cars are getting old. Radiator hoses, if they are original and you're taking things out to do a timing belt, might not be a bad idea to replace them. But the biggest offender in this car that will bring this engine down from a head gasket because it overheated is something called the heater T's. They're T-shaped kind of cross junction for the coolant all the way in the back. They are plastic. It's just how they deem them. However, you are usually at this point replacing the original ones, and if you touch them, they'll break. They're that brittle. If you are doing anything with the cooling system, replace the heater T's as part of it. You're going to drain the coolant anyways, might as well. Somewhat of an awkward place to get to them. You know, you have to reach in all the way in the back or from the side. But they're not difficult to replace. They're right there. They're very inexpensive. Now, some folks will put the metal version, put all the... Just replace them with plastic ones, honestly. Because if you have to replace these every 10 years, every timing belt replacement, it's not a bad deal. These are not expensive. They don't take much. Basically, every time you do a timing belt, check that radiator. If it hasn't been replaced as original, replace it. Same thing with the hoses. Same thing with the heater T's. Actually, the heater T's, every time you do a timing belt, then the water pump, just replace them. It's cheap insurance, let's put it this way. And the last thing I want to talk to you about here is oil pans. I am seeing an alarming number of stripped oil pans on these. Folks, just don't torque stuff to spec if they don't have the muscle memory of not over tightening stuff. If you strip the oil pan here, you have two options. You can either put a helicoil and hope it holds on the oil pan on this otherwise super reliable engine, or you can replace the oil pan. Unfortunately, the oil pan in the 100 series is a project and a half. Let's put it this way. So easy on these oil pans. Torque them to spec. If you're not sure, and don't go over tightening that bolt, always replace the gasket. That is recommended when you do an oil change. But if you strip an oil pan and you want to replace it, that's a proper repair for it, things are going to get expensive because they're not easy to get to. Now, the last two items, and they're kind of electrical stuff. There's not much that goes wrong with these engines electronically. They're all the sensors. As long as you take care of it with oil changes, they're fine. But two things. First, these have very fragile wiring harnesses. It's not a very big wire harness, actually very small, very simple. But when you work on these, whoever is working on them for you, be gentle. As these get older, they get brittle, they break. Be gentle with them. Connectors break, they're still available to replace them. Wires get damaged and insulation exposed, replace sections. Be gentle with the wiring harness. This is one thing, this comes with age. There's no way around it. And the last thing is, see, this engine initially had a very complicated drive-by-wire. It almost was not drive-by-wire. It was cable from the pedal all the way to the front to a little mechanism, and then that connected to a motor that turned, and it's just a super complicated mechanism. If that throttle body decide to call it quits, things will get extremely expensive. I just put it this way. Now, the later ones did eliminate this whole thing, and we have drive-by-wire proper. You just have a motor and the throttle body. These were a lot simpler and a lot more reliable than the early ones. Now, the early ones, we're talking Land Cruiser standards here. They're still super reliable, but the other one is a better version. Let's put it this way. The best version of this engine to buy is going to be the 2006, 2007. Folks, you immediately notice the difference in power. They run smoother. They're actually the newest version of the engine. A lot of little updates happened. Some of the updates happened around 2003, but majority of them happened in 2006, 2007. If you're really after the ultimate one, those are the 2 years to buy for as far as the engine is concerned. They also happen to be the newest. Let's talk about the transmissions options, because there's actually 2 transmission options for the 100 series Land Cruiser. And the first question I have for you is, do these have a transmission? I didn't know they did. They're very reliable, both of them. So from 98 all the way to 2002, you have the 4-speed, which is this one. From 2003 all the way to 2007, you have the 5-speed. Now, the 4-speed is more rugged, but it is also a 4-speed. That's one thing about it. Not much will go wrong with this transmission as long as you maintain it. Now, the transmission mount is known to collapse over time. Of course, it's just typical stuff from age, very simple to replace as long as it's not rusty. And it will cause some driveline vibrations. That is the one thing that you'll find with these. The 5-speed, if you neglect the maintenance on it, they are known to develop torque converter shutters. Heads up, and of course that is not the norm. You should maintain both these transmissions properly. Otherwise, you will not have much with these transmissions. Maybe once every blue moon you'll see a transmission pan gasket leak, which is nothing of a big deal, but that's about it with these. There's not much else that goes wrong with these. They're really good transmission options with these. Let's talk about the 4-wheel drive system. There is also not much that goes wrong with these, with the exception of not engaging them often. You don't go into your low range. If you have locking diffs, you never engage them for years and years, and all of a sudden you engage them, they get stuck. So it's not a bad idea every month or two, engage all the 4-wheel drive functions so nothing gets seized. And with that, I want to tell you a few things. These drive shafts, the rear one and the front one, they do have Zerk fittings. They do loves their greasing, but don't over grease them because they love to, especially this one in the front. You over grease this one, it'll start throwing grease everywhere on the exhaust and you start smelling burning smells. But otherwise, other than the maintenance, you're not going to have much with the 4-wheel drive system except the Achilles heels of the 100 series Land Cruiser when compared to the 80 series. The front axles. This has fully independent front suspension, unlike the 80 series. So the axles are one of the weak spots. If you lift these, you're going to start going through axles. That's just how it is. The other thing is, the axles are notorious for CV boot leaks. I mean, it's very simple to inspect it. You just come here, you see grease coming from here, or the outboard one. You need to pull the axle out, replace the CV boots, and re-grease them, and we're good. These have actually been re-greased, these particular ones. It's not a very super DIY friendly job because you got to take the wheel bearings and all that, but it is definitely something you can tackle if you're a little bit more experienced as a DIYer. But don't do one thing. Don't take this axle out because the boots are leaking and put an aftermarket one here. Don't do that. Save the originals, because the originals actually are very expensive and they last a very long time. The only thing that'll ever happen to them is they start leaking grease and you replace the boots and we're back in business. Nothing requiring a replacement here. Let's talk about the suspension of the 100 series Land Cruiser. Of that, you have 2 potential setups. You have the regular one, like this one, we'll look at it. Then you have the hydraulic suspension, or AHC. Let's talk about the regular suspension first. There is not a lot that will go wrong with these suspensions. They're very rugged, they're very basic, and there's not much that happens with them, with the exception of a few things that are mostly rust age related. The sway bar links in the front, they're very small. They're tiny. They love to break, especially when you add rust in the mix. So these are a common failure point. Very simple to replace, nothing very expensive. Now the front shocks, they can leak. They're actually super simple to replace on these. There's just not much to them. There's one thing that I will tell you about these. These don't have front springs, they have torsion springs. So you see this bar right here? It is twisted under pressure, and that's what holds the truck weight up. As long as we are not doing bad practices of lifting the truck from this and over twisting that, you're not going to have problems with them there, because there's not actually much to do here. It's a very simple system, works great. Not the best for handling, but it's very rugged. Just don't go modifying and cranking these to lift the truck up. That's actually not a good idea long term. And then the ball joints. At some point between 200,000 and 300,000 miles, you may have to go through ball joints, and I will give you one heads up. This control arm is a little bit involved to replace it, because you have to take the tension off the torsion spring, because you can't get to the bolt here with the torsion spring in the way. You see where it's attached right here, and there's a bolt that goes through. That's the only thing. The upper control arm, super simple. Usually what happens with these, they either have play or they will have squeaky sounds. That's one of their things. Very rare, but possible for the bushings in the control arms to go out. Now we're talking extreme heavy miles is when these go out, but they're rare. Now with that, let's switch into the AHC as we walk our way back, and I'll share with you a few more common things. The AHC system is pretty reliable for these if you maintain it. Every 60,000 miles, you want to see a fluid replacement. If you have leaks, fix them right away. Don't let the pump run low on fluid, because that's how these pumps go. And folks, when it comes to AHC systems, the shocks are not expensive, lines are a little bit expensive, but the pump and the valve block and the globes, things get extremely expensive if these go. One of the common problems with these, well, they'll start having like abnormal activations, although these are a lot better than 200 series ones. The globes, they're basically accumulators. They start clogging from dirty fluid, and we have issues activating, or like one side will come down and it'll take a while for the other side to come down. Don't let run with a contaminated fluid. This is how these systems go. Otherwise, they're super reliable other than the leaks. Leaks are manageable, but when you see a leak, fix it right away. Don't let that pump run dry, because then we have really big problems that get very expensive. But on both of them, the sway bar links in the back, there's a common thing that I see with them. This is a link. Folks will usually look at this bushing and everything is good. There's a bushing that goes in the bar itself. It actually does not come with the sway bar. Usually this is what gets loose more than the link itself. These links are also known to break at the top, especially when you have rust. So this is one thing you want to address. Otherwise, in the rear suspension department, there is not much that goes wrong. Honestly, these are very rugged and reliable. There's not much to go wrong with them. Even the AC one, if you maintain them, we don't have issues. Let's talk about the brakes of the 100 series, some of their common things. See, this car does not have rotor that just sits on the hub and we're good. This is old school. These are actually adjustable bearings, and they are tapered roller bearings. There's actually two of them on each wheel in the front. These bearings, let's put it this way, you're going to go through a lot of brakes in the 100 series Land Cruiser, because they have tiny little brakes and a giant big behemoth. So you're going to go through a lot of brakes, and every time you have to replace a rotor, you're going to have to pull the bearings and replace the rotor. That's just how this works. Now let's establish something with these. Every 2-3 brake jobs, replace the bearings. Not a bad idea. And when you do a brake job and you're not replacing the bearings, you got to clean them and repack them. That is important. This is the one thing, and you got to follow procedure, because I see so many of these not done properly, and then they overheat, and now we have noises and looseness and problems. That is a problem. And when you replace them, if you're not sure about it, go take them for a ride and then bring them back and readjust them. Sometimes they back off and you have play. That is one thing you got to check for. But equally, if you have rust, you notice the rust theme is really getting hard here. calipers sometimes will seize up in rust land. That is something common with these. If one seizes up, replace both because the other one is not far behind unless you've had it replaced in the past. The rear brakes are pretty simple, just standard parking brake in the shoe and everything, but they don't have the same in the front. This has different style bearing here. But the parking brake, see this little arm here that moves? In Rustland, this will seize up and you won't be able to activate your parking brake. See, there's this little crank and a bracket here that holds it. When you pull on this is the parking brake cable. This will pull and it'll engage the shoes. If this seizes up, and it's very common, you can crawl underneath it, pull on these. If they don't move like this, let's look at the other side. If they don't move like this, where you can pull them back, they're seized. I see folks will go and try to clean this and make it, it's not worth it, folks. Replace the crank, replace the bracket, see you in 10 years. It's as simple as that. Or you can spend 4 hours cleaning this up and trying to make it free again, and then give it a month, it'll be back to the same thing. That's one of these things that this is not fun work, let's put it this way. So if you have a seized one, and you want to check these when you buy one, because if this is a rusty car, this will definitely be seized if they've never been used in 10, 15 years. That's the common one on these. Let's talk about the most important thing when you go buy a 100 Series Land Cruiser, the frame and rust. Folks, I cannot emphasize how important it is you do not buy a 100 Series Land Cruiser that has rust. Very, very important, and I cannot emphasize how important it is. This is what makes and breaks this car. You buy one that's rusty, we're gonna have problems. A little bit of surface rust, not a big issue, but heavy rust, we have a problem. Let me show you some of their common things. The front sway bar bushing where it sits on the frame, it's a tiny little bracket that is welded. They love to break there from rust. And unfortunately, when you go try to weld that bracket back, there is not much metal left in where it used to go, because it's all rotten and corroded, to weld it onto. And now we have no sway bar. And this is already a giant boat feeling. You take the sway bar, it's even worse. So that is one area you want to check for. And then there's another area you want to check for that loves to rot on these. The cross braces of the frame, like this one, especially the back one. You will see rot all over here, all over the other crossbars. This is a very common spot for these. You see that, walk away. Ideally, if you're buying this as an enthusiast, you do not want to buy a rusty one. You want to buy one like this one. This one has zero rust. And no, this is not oil. It's actually coating for rust. This one has zero rust. Everything, like you look at the bolts have color still. That is never going to be the case with a rusty frame car. And while we are here, let me share with you a few disasters that will come from that. You want to change this control arm? Not going to happen. Every single bolt will break. It's all seized up. You can't even do an alignment right. That's the problem with the rusty ones. I mean, everything will start falling apart. The exhaust, look at this exhaust. It looks, I mean, it has a little surface rust. That's nothing. This is a brand new exhaust in my book. This particular one is a 99 here. The exhaust will start falling apart. This muffler is super expensive to replace, and everything will just start falling apart on it. And then you'll wonder at some point, why did I buy a Land Cruiser? It's just because it's gonna bankrupt me. And you'll be right. Don't buy a rusty one, folks. You will see so many of them for sale that have rust. Just avoid them. Walk away, please. Because so many Land Cruiser owners bring their cars here. They're all excited and happy. Let's get it all fixed up. As soon as I look at it, I'm like, this is a bad idea. There's holes everywhere in the frame. Everything is rotten. The exhaust is gone. There's rust on the body. It's like, this is the best car that will never live because it's all rotted. Don't do that, please. You see a little bit of surface rust, start investigating further. If you see a lot of rust on the vital components, and you see a lot of rust on that passenger side front sway bar bushing mount, walk away. It's not worth it. They're out there, folks. They command a premium when they're not rusty, but they're worth every penny versus a rusty one. Please don't buy a rusty one. Let's talk about the heating and air conditioning of the 100 Series Land Cruiser. And I made it this entire section because I want to warn you about one thing. The Land Cruiser, the 100 series, has one of the most complicated and one of the largest Toyota HVAC units, period. Even larger than the 200 series. So most of these models will have front AC and rear AC, completely separate units. They do share the same refrigerant, but they're completely separate units. And with that come the interesting part. When you go buy a rusty one, they are known to have AC line leaks between the seams, the connection points. They are known to have that. But here's the problem. Okay, well, an AC line leaks, that's not a big deal. Try disconnecting any of these AC lines. They never come off. Everything breaks, everything comes apart, and just you end up having to replace the AC line from the front all the way to the back at a hefty cost. And then there's a second thing. The evaporator in the back is known to leak. They're very common to leak, and it's a very major operation to get into it. It looks simpler. Actually, the front one is simpler than the back one. Let's put it this way. Because the lines don't want to come off. That's usually why. And which is what brought this particular LX470. We'll talk about Land Cruiser versus LX470 in a bit. But this one has a problem with the rear evaporator. It's very expensive, and parts availability is becoming an issue. There is one thing I'd like you not to do, although Land Cruiser owners love to do that. When the rear AC goes, they love to cap the lines and forget about it. Don't do that, because your charge will be actually overcharged. And we get into the zone of, did you buy this Land Cruiser just to mend it and keep going, or to fix it right and keep going with it with its full potential? Because when these things work, they have really nice features for as old as they are. Try not to cut corners with these cars. If you're not going to be able to afford to maintain them properly, perhaps buy something simpler, because these, they like their maintenance, and when you maintain them right, you will enjoy them for years to come without issues. But be careful of the rusty one. Another common spot for leaks from AC, other than these lines right here under the hood, on the passenger side frame rail, there are two lines that come down for the rear AC. They love to leak there from rust. They just crud accumulates there, and eventually the O-ring swells and starts leaking. Never separate that line, because it'll never come apart. Just heads up on that. That's one of their common stuff. Let's talk about some of the electrical stuff and just the odds and ends around the body that you need to be aware of. The first thing is, we already talked about the frame. Do not buy a rusty one. That is the biggest mistake you will make. Trust me, I see this problem all the time. It will take a car that will otherwise will last you almost a lifetime to a car that will bankrupt you slowly. Be careful. Starting with that, water leaks in Land Cruisers will send them down. Let's put it this way. Biggest leak is around the windshield at the top. If you see rust spots and windshields cracking because of the rust bubbles, they will run down the water right into the fuse block, right into the integration relay, which is a common problem with these. That is not good. Water leaks in Land Cruisers can end them. They'll start draining the battery. They'll start having all kinds of electrical gremlins. Be careful with rust, and especially around the top of the windshield. And even if you're not in a rust belt, if you see rock chips on top, repair them right away. Touch them up. Don't let that rust start forming. And another thing with the Land Cruiser, especially the older ones, door locks, they love to go. You go buying one, don't just operate the door locks once. Operate them 3 times in a rush. You'll see 2 of them will operate once, and they'll stick halfway and they'll stop. That is super common with these. Unfortunately, they're starting to discontinue the door locks. There's ways around it. You can rebuild them, you can whatever the case, but check the door locks because they are expensive. And equally, check the window motors. You'll operate the window, it'll come down very happy. But you go up, it'll start going slow. And then halfway, it'll just stop. You got to give it a minute because it has a circuit breaker for it to come back up. Check them because the motors are very, very expensive. Some of them are starting to discontinue here. And the only option you have is a horrible aftermarket one. So when you're buying one, check the window motors because they're heavily used. They will wear out and then stop working. And the last thing, we talked about the frame rust and all that. And we already talked about rust. There are a couple things on the body. just if you're shopping online for one, on an auction, whatever the case, before you go make the drive or just buy it sight unseen, couple things that will tell you this is a rust car or not rust car. Open the hood and look at the hood latch. That's the first sign that this is a rust car, without even looking at anything else. If the hood latch is rusty, this car is rusty, walk away. Now, unfortunately, some folks know about this and they'll go replace it and you won't see it. But the other spot is the windshield. If you have any rust around there, we're walking away from this car. And a super common spot, all the way in the back door, there is an area that loves to rust on these. You see any bubbling, any rust there, walk away from this car. That's a rusty car and you will have nothing but issues. Couple electrical gremlins, let's talk about them. Land Cruisers, especially the later ones, they love to drain their battery. There is one thing about them that loves to drain the battery, which is the telematics. They're all canceled out, nothing works. There is a telematics fuse you can pull out and it'll significantly drop the parasitic draw. If you have that issue, pull that fuse and you'll be okay. But if you have parasitic draw on the early ones, that windshield is leaking, you got water in there. That's one of their common quirks. But generally, and I will say this, these do like to consume their batteries. You leave them parked for 2-3 weeks, you're going to have a flat battery. That's just how they are. They consume a lot when they're off. That is one of their things. And the last thing, the newest models with navigation, the newer models, they tend to have some issues with the screen. That's just how they are. They'll go all of a sudden, cannot communicate with this, or I forgot the exact messages, but it'll display a message and they lose communication with everything else. They are a little expensive to fix. You might want to find a good screen repairman and they can take that screen and repair it, or the whole radio unit, because it's integrated. This is where the early ones are a little bit better with that. If you can buy one without a navigation screen where everything is integrated, for longevity it is better, but they are so nice, the newer ones with that. So if you buy one and it goes, just know that that screen at some point will need some repair. So the biggest question is, you notice these two cars are very identical and they are exactly the same, just a few visual differences. This is a Land Cruiser. This is a Lexus LX470. They are exactly the same, folks, and you can expect the exact same level of reliability, feel, everything. The only difference is the look. I think this looks better than that. That's just personal taste, and that's what folks go after. However, I notice a trend. These are more expensive and harder to find than LX470s, but equally, you will find these a lot in better shape than the LX470s for some reason. I feel like the Lexus LX470 buyer back in those days, they bought it as a big luxury SUV. People bought a Land Cruiser because it is a Land Cruiser. They know exactly what it is. So there's a trend that you will find these more expensive than the LX, even though they're exactly the same. They are exactly the same. Only difference is, if you want to avoid the whole AHC and everything we talked about, you can't have that in the LX470. They all had AHC, while the Land Cruiser, you could have either or. That is the only thing. And as far as conversions, see, this one had an AHC, but it's been converted. Be careful with the conversions because they're not straight conversions. You actually, the torsion springs have to be replaced. Some will disagree. No, you can just crank them up. You're going to crank them up and it's going to change the ride quality, because this one has a conversion, but this one rides better because this one actually, unfortunately, has a torsion spring that's cranked up. So the ride quality will change when you go from cancel AHC and put the shocks from this car here. It will sag down. You have to lift it up in the front and change the rear springs. Rear springs not a big deal, but the torsion spring, you have to crank it up. So that is the only compromise. If you go buy an LX470 for a decent deal over a Land Cruiser, just know that you will have the AHC and you're going to have to take care of it. And that is the 100 series Land Cruiser. Folks, these trucks, if you buy them well and you check for the rust part, that is the most important part. Everything else we can live with, but the rust part, walk away. I see so many folks bring me here cars for purchase inspection, post-purchase inspection. No, but it's a Land Cruiser, it has rust. I'm not talking a little surface rust, no, severe rust where we have holes in the frames, things are broken, everything is seized up, and walk away. These are not good for rust. You buy one like this one that has no rust, anything that it has we can fix, but if it has rust, we walk away. These are truly just legend reliability, folks. You will drive these into some unbelievable miles and they'll just keep going. But just know one thing also going into them, their parts are expensive, their repairs are expensive, especially that AHC. Oh, do not be caught with a bad AHC repair because things will get astronomical. And the last thing is, these are DIY cars. These are becoming enthusiast cars. You buy this, you need to do some things to them. You can't just send them to get worked on for every little thing. And that's fine if you can afford it, but you can't buy these on the cheap and expect to run them on the cheap. They will have their moments where they're going to get expensive, but they're not every month something comes up. You're going to have waves. It seems like every 100,000 miles with these, you're going to run through the wave. Timing belt, cooling stuff. You're going to run through the bearings and the brakes, continuous brakes over and over and over. They have their quirks. But overall, you will never find a car from this era that looks like this, functions like this, and as reliable as they are, like the Land Cruiser 100 Series. The 100 Series Land Cruiser, secretly, is my favorite Land Cruiser. They ride the best. They are the perfect combination between their off-road ruggedness, but at the same time, creature comfort and just how smooth they are. That was one of the things the 80 Series did not have. 200 Series, I feel like it went a little bit too much on the luxury and comfort side. Still very capable off-road, but this one was a perfect compromise between the two. But just know one thing, they are getting old and they will need their repairs and their care and their maintenance. Folks, I hope this video was helpful and informative. I hope you learned something new. If you like it, consider giving it a thumbs up. If you're not a subscriber, consider subscribing to the channel. Check out some of my other videos. Until the next video, folks, may the Lord bless you and keep you, and you have yourself a wonderful day.